Welcome back to another episode of the Hall of Sports podcast, and it's another episode of the Rugby Room. And I'm joined today by Patrick Rala O'Reilly, and it's really good to have you on today, Patrick. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Kieran, and thanks for having me on, as they say on the shows. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor, indeed.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. We were just kind of talking just off screen there about your book, where it was A Life in Rugby. Now, a lot of this is to do, and you've told me, is you have a lot of interest in kind of the history of rugby. So I guess the first kind of key question there is really, how did this sport come about? Because we know about a lot of other sports and how they originated, but I don't think a lot of people are too privy to know how the sport of rugby did come about. So if you have any information on that, that'd be brilliant.
Okay, Kieran. Well, way back in the 1800s or thereabouts, don't quote me on the dates, it could be a little bit off. Way back in those days, there was played in England a sort of a game of football, whereupon the participants would gather together in the field or on the street, could be 50, 60, 40, and they kicked this round thing up and down the street. And rugby school in England, where one William Webb, thanks Dixie, William Ellis Webb was a pupil in rugby. Could have been anywhere, but it was in a place called Rugby. And he was involved in the game one day, and they were kicking the ball up and down the field, maybe 100 or so people and students. And he decided, in his wisdom, to pick the ball up and run with it to the far side of the field. And that's what they think is how rugby started. Now, there's no proof of that, may I add. It's just a legend, and it's a great legend. I believe in it myself, but it's not a proven scientific theory of William Webb Ellis. Now, William Webb, indeed, just what I mentioned, rugby school there came across to me a couple of months ago in the Aviva Stadium, a gentleman and a son from rugby. And he was impressed with the old tour, and he loved rugby. And he played for a rugby club down the road from rugby school called the Rugby Lions. And actually, every year they have a match between the school and the Rugby Lions in honor of William Webb. And indeed, the road that this club is on is called William Webb Ellis Road. Thanks, Dixie. Sorry. And he indeed, the same gentleman, a few weeks afterwards, sent me a tie of rugby school, a rugby tie, and indeed a tie from his club, the Rugby Lions Club, which is two treasures of mine to this day. But William Webb himself, when he qualified, this is true, when he qualified from schooling, he joined the church and he practiced around the London area, Essex. Eventually, he emigrated to France. He retired there to a place called Menton. Now, my French is not great, so I think it's Menton, Menton, where he lived out his days, and he's obviously buried there. His grave actually was discovered in around 1958 by one of the Guinness Book of Records gentlemen, and to this day, one can visit William's grave site if you happen to be in Menton. So that's a brief, and of course, in honor of the legend, in honor of the story, they called it, when they got the World Cup, the first one was 1987, and New Zealand won that one, and they named the trophy William Webb Ellis Trophy. It took a long time to get that World Cup together. There was various meetings for amounts of years, and eventually in the early 80s, it was decided to host a World Cup. And where better place to host it than the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand, and which they duly won.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting one, that because we will go through some of the the history of the game and why it actually took so long for the World Cup to come about. Because again, we look at rugby now, and every international team is so focused on those 4 years to get to the World
That's right.
Cup. So why did it take so long for the World Cup to actually be established when really
Yeah.
it was almost 100 years, wasn't it, by the time the game started to when the World Cup actually began?
Yeah, thereabouts. But the world powers, the people who played in the rugby, like they couldn't agree on a format of the World Cup, and eventually they did. In as I say, in the early 80s, and they had it in 87. Yeah, it took a long time, but it was good that they
Worth
did
it.
it because now we have the World Cup. I
Yeah,
mean, it's not like
absolutely.
the Olympics and they go back to the Grecian days, but yeah, it took a while, but we have it now anyway.
That's the
Uh,
important thing.
that's the important thing, yeah. And
Yeah,
I think New Zealand have won it a few times. Australia have won it twice. South Africa have won it 3 times. I think New Zealand won it 3 times too. I think. But no one like France, England. England won it, of course. Sorry, England won it in 2003. So they're the only northern country that has won the World Cup. In fairness to them, fair play to them.
yeah,
Someday,
absolutely.
someday, someday, Irlande will win it.
Yeah, if we're lucky, we'll get to see that. So just talking about yourself and your own life in rugby is how did it start? Because again, I would say when you were younger, it probably wasn't one of the more popular sports out there because we look at it in Ireland, we look at over the past 20 years maybe and how the kind of popularity of the sport has grown. So what was it like when you started in the sport?
Oh God, how long have you got?
A while.
Um, well, myself personally, I was on the under 10 or under 9 team in school in Turner College, and I played rugby for many, many, many years, right up till I was about 34, 35. And then I became a bagman for my club, Turner, and that transferred onto. I got the gig with the Leinster under 20s. Then I got the Leinster seniors. Then I got Ireland, and then I got the Lions. So it was like this progress bit by bit. And but rugby, like I've been involved in so all those years, up till even last year, I was involved with my club. I was doing the bag for the. I was involved with the 20s and the J1s second team, and just because I love it, Kieran, really, the game, and the rugby people, of course, all over the world. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So with all that, because you've mentioned a lot of different teams there, and is there any kind of memories that stick out from your time, whether it's with Leinster, whether it was with Ireland, or anything further? Because there's a lot. I was reading a couple of articles there, and it looks like the relationship that you had with a lot of the players kind of grew, and a lot of them speak very fondly of you. I know I read an article that Ronan OReilly wrote a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2015, and he spoke about the relationship that you had with the players. What were some of the fond memories of your time with Ireland?
Oh gosh, Janie Mac. Well, first of all, I'm nothing special, Kieran. There's hundreds, maybe thousands of bagmen throughout the world, including Samoa, who sort of do the same thing. I remember when I got my first Lions call up, I rang Keith Woody, and I said in a panic, I said, Woody, I'm going on the Lions. What do I do? What do I do? And he said, Rala, be yourself. And that was always the formula that I followed, just to be yourself. Your basic job is to look after the players and the coaches and the management. So you're more or less like a butler as you go along. And no matter what daft request is made, it's not for me. It's what the player wants. So if somebody asks me for pink buttons for his shirt, it might seem a bit funny to me, but to the player, it's important. That's what he wants, and that's what I try to get him. I don't always have everything on the spot, but I'll go out of my way to get these requests. it's sort of a simple formula, really. At the end of the day, but you mentioned what's that you said there, Kieran? What was the main memories?
Yeah, was there any kind of memories that kind of stuck out during your time, whether it
Well,
was with Leinster, the Lions, or with Ireland?
there's so many, but obviously, like Brian's hat trick in Paris in 2000 was a watershed. Was like breaking into a new world, beating France in Paris. That was a magical time, especially for himself, of course, and the team. Ronan's drop goal at 0-9 is also a great memory in Cardiff. Another one possibly would be the Lions in Australia in the last test, when the lads won the series. And of course, the Lions beating the All Blacks in Eden Park to draw the series. Another magical moment. And the middle match was, I've been involved in so many games versus the All Blacks. The one in New Zealand, it was the middle match where the boys won the game, and that was super magical that night. Yeah, in Eden Park.
One of the interesting ones when I was reading the article that Ronan OReilly did write, and one of the kind of lines that kind of came up to me was this one, where he goes, "He was completely underappreciated by many as the hidden heroes who fulfill such duties that are frequently are." Now, one of the things that he mentions is just the fact that where he would be behind at his kicking practice after practice, and you'd be there, and you would, whether he was kicking 40 balls into touch or he was doing all of his place kicks, you were always there to retrieve the ball and bring it back. Do you think that time with some of the kickers actually helped in terms of your relationship with them, where they were seeing you more on that kind of personal level and you were there with them to help them more than anything else?
Yeah, by its nature, one would spend more time with the kickers because on the day off, that's the day the lads, it's usually Wednesday, would go to a ground to do their kicking. And that was a gig that usually took about 2 hours. So night before that, I would prepare, it could be 2, maybe 3 kickers. I would prepare the footballs, water, drinks, and fruit, etc. And off you go with the boys, to do their kicking. Indeed, I remember once somewhere in Argentina, and there was a moat around the field with water in it, and the lads kept kicking the balls into the feckin' moat, So, Rala, you get the ball, come on, what's keeping you, I had to get a sort of a fishing net, like to try and get the balls out. But that's the fun of it. Like, it's not, a game only lasts for 80 minutes on Saturday, usually. Training a few times a week, kicking usually Wednesday. So you do spend more time off the field with the players, and days off or evenings off. So you sort of we go out for coffee with Keane or Jamie or whatever, and Ronan, of course. And in fact, I was only talking to Ronan the other day in La Rochelle. I wasn't there now. I was talking to him on just out of the Oak, and he's the same as ever. He's a fantastic person, and he's up there like with the greats. There, Ronan, yeah. Or Rog, as we sometimes call him,
Yeah. Yeah, he's had an interesting career even post his playing days, because we've seen him obviously in France for a lot of the time. We saw that when he went over to New Zealand. Is there anything about him personally that you would have known when he was a player that he would make a good coach? Because often it's difficult to know, because there's always that saying in football that really good players, it's very hard for them to become good coaches because they just know what to do and it's very hard to teach it. Was there anything when you knew Ronan early on that you could kind of estimate that this might be his career path after his playing days?
No way, Kieran, did I know that Ronan would end up in New Zealand or La Rochelle or Paris, wherever. No hint of it. players like they sort of wouldn't really be going what's after rugby to me, like, because I had a specific job is to try and look after them. But the coaches coached them. The bus driver drove the bus, and I sort of had the studs and the spanner and the water and all that sort of stuff. No, there's no indication whatsoever. I hope someday he comes home to Ireland. It's my wish, which I'm sure he will someday.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one or two comments here. One from the Lions documentaries that someone said that they loved you in those and it was a great character. And also, who's your favorite player that you've worked with? So that must be a difficult one. With
Very.
There's a lot of them. We've mentioned Ronan OReilly already. Is there anybody else that even during the Lions tour that you've done that would be one of your kind of favorites?
They're all favorites, Kieran. I mean, it's very hard to pick out one. Like, I mean, the Lions was what, 3 tours, could be 100, 120, 130 players. You can't really pick out a favorite. No. To me, they're all favorites.
Was there any in particular that you were closer with?
No, not really. No, I mean, I don't know if you read it. Like, usually tradition is the eve of match. I would have my doors always open until it's closed. That was what I said in my first meeting. They all thought that was very funny, but it was a fact. Like, it's open except it's closed, But anyway, no, I do have a setup in the room, kettle tea, few biscuits, whatever, and the lads just drift in and out, like Alwyn, Peter, Brian. Look, it's endless. Shane. I mean, to me, being amongst, it's very hard to explain the Lions. It's just amazing when you walk in, like, into the changing room, for example, and I preparing the change room for the game, and the next thing, Ugo Manu walks in, Alvin Jones, Ken Owens, Owen Farrell, what's his name? The hooker's name? I fucking know. I just can't think of his name. What? I was trying to think. Jamie George, Paul O'Connell, Jonathan, another great gentleman. Where does it end? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. So of those,
I can't.
Yeah, of those 3 Lions tours that you were involved in, which one was your favorite one to be in? And there was a comment here that said that someone particularly loved the South Africa tour. Was there any in particular of those ones that you did that you found most enjoyable, whether it was the particular selected players or if it was just the actual kind of tour in itself?
Each tour has its own special moments and special times. South Africa was unbelievable. I mean, straight away, it's a beautiful country, and I mean, to be going around it in airplanes and buses and whatever with the Lions it was my first tour, and I just couldn't believe it. The guys and Mike Phillips and all this gang, and it's just and to be around and everywhere you go, these countries love the Lions. It's hard to imagine, but they do. And anywhere the Lions go, like the players, of course. I remember once in where was it? I don't know. It was in Cape Town, and it was an evening off, and we were going to go out for dinner. And the Lions have their own bus, the players, and the management have their own bus. And we arrived anyway, and there's hundreds of fans waiting for the Lions. It's like a street full of bars and restaurants. And we went anyway, and we had the meal, and I just happened to ramble next door. There's a bar next door, and I went in there. It was packed with fellas and women, and I sat at this bar, at this table, and there was 4 guys sitting around the table, and I fell into conversation with them because I had the Lions top on, of course. Oh, the Lions. And I was chatting away to them. I said, lad, and they were ordinary. They were from Wales, actually, and they were ordinary type of guys. Like, they weren't like surgeons or whatever. And I happened to say to them, how did you manage to get out here to South Africa, lads? It must cost a lot. And they replied, well, it's very simple, Rala. When we go home, we will immediately commence saving for the next tour to Australia. They chip in like a tenner a week or something, which pays for the more or less for the tour. And that's the Lions players management. But the most important thing of the whole thing is the fans. They actually love the Lions and the countries you go to. Lions, you hear the roaring on the street, Lions, Lions. It's magical. It's so unique.
Yeah,
Very, very special.
It really is a unique experience because you look at it even from the start, because you don't see it in many other sports where there's a group of countries that come together to form one team to play against the likes of a New Zealand or an Australia or South Africa. But the fact that we have it in rugby, I guess one of the key questions is, where did the concept of the Lions Tour actually come about? Because like we said, it doesn't really happen in many other sports.
Yeah, good question, Kieran. I'll have to take you back a little bit. This is one of my faults, yapping too much. But way back in the 1880s, there was two English gentlemen. One was named Shaw, and the other's name was Shrewsbury, I think. And they had previously brought a cricket team down south. So they decided upon their return to bring a rugby team down south to Australia and New Zealand. It wasn't vetted by the unions, but they didn't stop it in any way. So off they went 1888 on this tour. It took them about 4 weeks to get there. The captain was the chap by the name of Robert Seddon from Lancashire. He was captain for England. He had about 4 caps. And it consisted mainly of English players, and there was no Irish. And off they went and did the games. And unfortunately, Robert drowned on the River Hunter in Australia, outside a town called Maitland, I think. The team was they had no really name, was sort of the British Isles team, you know. It wasn't until around when the Irish came aboard in around 1910 that the unions sanctioned the tour, and it was called, I don't know that those days was the British and Irish Lions, but certainly in the 50s, the name was officially the British and Irish Lions touring side. If you think in the last 3 tours, which I know a little bit about, if you think of the managers on those tours, the last one, you had John Spencer, a British Lion, English centre, an amazing gentleman, is there, John. Before that, we had in Australia, we had Andy Irvine, and that great Scottish fullback, stroke winger, who went on a few tours. And in South Africa in 09, he had probably the ultimate line with Sir Ian McGeechan, who played. He was on that 74 tour. He didn't make the test side, but you know, it's great to be in the starting 15. But the guys behind on the bench and the guys who don't tog out that day, they're also very, very important, because when you buy into the Lions, it's like a family. It's one for all for one. It's just, I suppose, the same in national teams too. But it's just some spark there with the Lions. It's incredible. Anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because when you do a bit of reading up on it, and we see it now, and I think we take it for granted, but with that first test, that they were basically traveling for the majority of the year. So there was 2/3 of the year they were overseas, and it is pretty incredible when you look at it. And just like one of the key stats that I saw is wanted to wonder actually how successful the Lions have been over time, and they've actually had 651 games where the Lions have won 488 of them. And that's amazing for a touring side, especially nowadays where travel is so quick and the lads are together for, in relative terms, a short period of time. To still be that successful together is very remarkable.
Yeah, well, it's thanks to the manager and the coaches. In my case, I had Warren and Ian, the captain and the Kings. That's my nickname for the players. It's the captain and the Kings. It's from some poem. Yeah, it's incredible. Like, I mean, you take any picture. You mentioned like the longevity of the lines. Take any picture of the team shot, 22 or 23 or whatever. You can break that picture down to parts. First of all, you'd have the history of the squad in New Zealand, say, where they were, where they played, results, etc. Then you can break the picture down again by, let's say, Paul O'Connell. If you take him out of the picture and you say, "Ooh, where's Paul? What's the story?" So you break down Paul. So every picture, as you say, tells a story, and that's only one picture. Can you imagine all the pictures? Well, in any sport, in Gaelic, hurling, whatever, and women's rugby, breaking down the picture, so you'll never know the history, the full history of rugby. Never will. You can pick at it and try to, pick out points, but it's such a. You want to be a genius to know it all. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot when we pick back up to the Lions tour, because you can go all the way back to kind of what you were saying in kind of 1888. But then when you look at all that, and there's a lot of history there, what tour do you think is the most memorable one? Even as you said yourself, as a rugby historian, which one do you enjoy kind of talking about and reading about most?
Well, obviously the ones I was involved in. Of course, you go back to the Lions in '74, Willie John's Lions. I mean, the most successful Lions tour ever so far. And then you have the New Zealand in 71, I think it was. That was another very, very successful tour. And some of them haven't been so lucky either, mind you. But, and that's life, I guess. Sometimes they come up against whatever, and then you have injuries, and you have this, and you have that. And,
Yeah,
the Invincibles, 74, Willie John.
yeah, it's an
I played
interesting
against
one.
him, by the way, Kieran. I played against Willie John.
How did that go?
Not too good for me. Not too good.
Yeah,
I spent 80 minutes trying to avoid him.
Yeah, he's the most capped Lions player up to this
17,
point.
17 tests, which is some record. He's some man. Then you have, I think, Tony O'Reilly, 6 tries in the game or something like that. So all these records. Again, it's known the picture, known the individual, the score sheet, who scored, and all that.
Yeah, one of the other interesting ones is I think this was from one of the South Africa tests. Is what was the famous 99 call for the Lions? If you can remember.
I can remember. Yeah, that was 74. Actually, yeah, you're right, 74. Willie John, and there was a code that they would say if there was any argy-bargy on the field. The South Africans are tough men, I can tell you. But in actual fact, the original call was 999. And so someone suggested they reduce it to 99, because again, you say 999, the thing would be over,
Yeah.
And that's how it got to 99, yeah.
It's an interesting one that they had to come up with a call for. It's kind of that retaliation type. If someone's being a little bit too aggressive in it, that at least everybody's there to kind of back you up, which is, again, it's really interesting, because again, I think as a international team, you would get it because you're there to support kind of your countrymen and the people you've played with for years and years. But some of these players may have only played with their teammates maybe once or twice on these Lions tours, and
that's right.
It just shows how important that kind of coaching staff is and the managers to kind of get
Absolutely.
everybody together.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Lions nowadays, the staff is huge. Like Kieran, players tour usually around 38 players now, I think, and it was got cut down to 10 games. Now it's down to 8 games for next tour. Please God. And how's it going on about there, Karen?
Yeah, it was just in terms of how important the kind of coaching staff and managers
Oh
are
yeah.
to get people together.
Yes, it's amazing how they do it. But some people have the knack, like Warren, for example. They have the knack of bringing everybody into the. I never forget like my first training session with the Lions. It was in Bagshot, Penny Hill, Penny Hill House and Spa and Bagshot. It's the English HQ actually. It's about an hour from Twickenham, and it was a Sunday morning. There's a field there, beautiful field. It's a Sunday morning. Now the Lions have a color code for training: green jersey, navy jersey, white jersey. They've no red jersey, so they have to tog out in this gear for the training session number 1. So the morning dawned in Bagshot, and I was out in the field. I had this couple of tables and these, this, that, and the other. Had my music on. I was playing the '60s music, which is my favorite, and had my back to where the lads would be coming from. I had a little golf cart to bring all the stuff down, and help, of course, from the staff. And anyway, I was sitting there listening to what do you call them, the Kinks, Waterloo Sunset. Ray Davis, and I had poured myself a cup of coffee, and I took out a Lulu, which is a cigarette, and there I was sat there feeling quite pleased with myself. Sun was shining, la la la, and the next thing, I just happened to look around, and behind me was a sort of a little mini wooded area where the lads would have to walk through from the main door to get to the field. And all I could see was a sea of green lads, green jerseys, walking towards me, holding their boots, and they walked in their trainers. I said, "Oh, flip!" I said, "Jesus!" And so I jumped up. I don't know what happened. I put the music off. I put the cigarette into the coffee, and I was running around like my hair was on fire. At the shock of seeing 38 guys coming towards me and coaches. And I remember I turned off the music. Yeah, I managed to do that without wrecking it. And Ricky Flutie came over to me and said, "Oh, Rala, leave the music on." And which was great, because thereafter I sort of had the music for myself, and then after training, Rala, leave the music on until we want you to turn it off. So that's how the music crept in. It carried it forward from the Irish camps,
Yeah, absolutely.
What am I going on with that story?
One of the other things that you mentioned, which was interesting, was the whole idea that your door was always open for some of the players to come in. So what was it like those kind of nights before a big game would happen, especially on the Lions tour? What was the atmosphere like?
Bit mad, really, Sometimes you might have 6 guys, sometimes it could be 20. Sometimes there was no obligation for one to visit, but my room was always placed in the middle of the players' area for such things like that, And you flick on the music, as I said, the tea, kettle, blah blah, and you could have what's his name? Oh, and Jonathan, all that gang to come in, and they sit and they chat. They mostly chat amongst themselves about the game and about this, that. In fact, a lot of times I would leave the room and let them get on with their chats, But it was a bit sort of it, yeah. I remember after one of those evenings, I got into my cot around midnight, and around 1 o'clock there was a knock on the door, and said, "Flip me." One of the players must have forgot his boots or something. But no, it was the porter in the hotel. He had a treble sardine sandwich that stacked high on the plate. I says, "Where are you going with that?" He said, "You ordered this around 1 o'clock." So what? So fucking took the sandwich in and plonked it there, and then I got a call about 5 o'clock to go to the airport. But this is the lads. This is all the crack that goes on, just all the messing, and you need a bit of fun,
Yeah,
It's not all
especially
serious,
for yeah, especially for a tour where you do look at it and it's lads from different countries that
Yeah,
again they don't get to play with each other as much. Like you see it a little bit more now with players kind of moving across different countries.
that's right.
But even you look at it back in even just a decade ago to maybe 20 years ago, most players played within their own countries, and it must have been really tough for the coaching staff to kind of get that bit of atmosphere together with players that are so used to playing against each other internationally and now have to play with each other. Was there ever like a difficult time for some of these players to come together, or is it very natural when they kind of just join the tour that they just know that they're one of the Lions and that they know that they have to work together?
Yeah, you've answered the question there, Kieran. Very natural. These guys know the Lions ethos before they get selected. They all want to be selected. Only 38, 40 would be selected, but they know before they step foot into the camp. And I've never seen anything anyway of me obviously Jonathan and Owen going on for coffee and all this other stuff. People make their own little going for coffee mostly, But no, you'd never see anything like that in the Lines. It wouldn't be the thing to do anyway, because it's such a short space. You haven't time to la too much, Um, it's like 10 weeks, and well, you'd have a bit of time before that also, because they'd have training camps before that, usually 2.
Yeah.
And so they get to know, and then they have to tug out, they get measured, and they get to collect the gear on one of the days in a hotel, usually in London, and then you get to know them more there, like I was disappointed when Billy didn't make the last. You got injured, Billy V, and I was chatting away to him, and then after that he got injured, and he didn't. Unfortunately, he didn't make the tour.
Yeah,
Maybe next.
those ones are unfortunate. We even just looking back at the last tour, how do you feel about that with the draw to New Zealand? It's not one that you see very often. You usually do get a winner after all these different tests, but I just know as a viewer looking at a team, both teams kind of raised the trophy. It was a little bit surreal because you're so used to having a winner at the end of things. How was that for you? Because it was a very interesting one.
Yeah, I loved it when that whistle went. I couldn't wait for the whistle to go when it was a draw. In fact, that picture you talked about is up in my hall, up the stairway there, with Kieran
Reid
and Sam. Yeah,
yeah,
it's up on my wall. I see it every day if I'm going out. It's on the wall with Sam and Kieran holding the trophy up, the trophy, and Kieran has his hat on him because that was his 100 cap. Kieran Reid, and that magical time. It was fantastic. It's so unique. I mean, what's the chances of that happening again?
Yeah, absolutely. It's you look at it and we've been having tours since 1888, and it's happened once. So it was a surreal moment, because I think you look back on the last couple of tours and there's been a couple of really good kind of interesting ones. We can even go back to the Australia one, the South African one that you've been involved in as well. And like you said, that there's a lot of interesting things that kind of come up on each tour is just different. You mentioned earlier on that your job was basically to kind of be there for the players and any of the requests that they had that you would come up with. Was there any really, really odd or random requests that kind of stick out in your mind that it still kind of puzzles you that they would have asked for that, or if it was like one of the jokes that came up, or like you mentioned, the idea is if they ask you to get pink buttons, you just get it and you wouldn't have to question it.
Yeah, no, there's no really, like when you're a bagman, Kieran, the first rule is, because you see things, You hear things. First rule is you cannot repeat any things that goes on here and there. So if a player said to me, "I want this, I want that," I wouldn't be in a position to 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 give that out. Like, but no, I've never really had anything anyway.
Yeah.
But no, you wouldn't. Players trust you, Kieran.
And that's the biggest thing, because, like I said, even reading some of the articles that were put out when you finished with Ireland, you could see that there was that sense of trust and relationship with the players, and obviously that's extremely important. When you look at it, what would you say is your kind of proudest moment? Would it be with the Lions that you got to make it to that level, or was it the fact that you got to be there with Ireland, especially during those kind of Joe Schmidt years when we really got to see some of the kind of the successes? Because you look at the differences for Ireland, and it's difficult to find a period of time where we're just as successful as we've seen in recent times.
Sorry, Kieran, I don't get that. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So what was your proudest moment? So, like,
oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my main moments is when 30 players walk off the field, as they went onto the field in full health, etc. Bit tired, maybe. They can walk off the field and clap each other in, and that's they're my moments that I love.
Yeah.
They're so important, but the lads, all the boys, including the opposition, are injury free. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like that.
So again, as a historian of the game, and we'll kind of move further onto kind of the Irish side of things now, is how big of a change have you seen in kind of the development in rugby in Ireland over the last number of years compared to kind of early on? Because I know it's only been fairly recent that we would say it's been a very professional, the kind of pro era of Irish rugby has been over the last kind of 2 decades. So how did we get to this point in time?
The event of rugby going professional around 96, I think it was. From that day, things began to improve, and to such an extent that now we have Ireland way up there, number one. They were a while ago, number 2, number 3 in the world, and that's professionalism. The diets and coaches and etc. Line out coach, scrum coach, It's bound to improve, and in fact, it'll probably get even better as time goes on, because they're always inventing new type of things to help the team. And we've started, New Zealand and those were sort of ahead of us a little bit back in the day, but now we've caught up and surpassed in a lot of cases the teams. You see even Argentina, the way they're always improving, Italy, please God, will someday be up there as well. It's down to the coaches, really.
Yeah,
and the players' dedication, because you have to buy into this way of life. It's not easy, I can tell you. Not easy. Tough on them.
Yeah, it's a tough one, especially when we mentioned even with Italy, because it's only been fairly recent that it's moved from the 5 nations to the 6, and we haven't seen that as much development in kind of the Italians. Now, we've seen some of the good play, but they haven't been able to put it together. How did Ireland do that? Because early on, while it took time for Ireland to win games, there were periods of time that we were successful before going pro, where you did see some good wins against the likes of the French. We did early on beat England. So how did we get to that point, even before having kind of a professional way about how we wanted to incorporate rugby in Ireland?
Yeah, well, I mean, Ireland, they won the Grand Slam in 1948. They won the Grand Slam in 09 and 18. So, I mean, you're up there if you win that, Grand Slam is so difficult to win. It's such a long journey, So, on that note, I'd like to wish Andy and the gang all the best for the weekend and the upcoming games. But it's, I mean, Irish, they're great. I mean, look at the Gaelic players, look at the hurling players and women. I mean, look what they can do, what they can achieve. And rugby is up there with them now, um, through their commitment, through their sacrifice, um, to the coaches and the modern day dietitians, etc. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's only 15 against 15, 2 arms, 2 legs, etc. Although I think the Irish, if my memory serves me correctly, in Ireland's first international in 1875, I think, one of the players had only one hand. Would you believe?
Yeah, that's really hard to believe.
I know that, but it could be a Rallism or it could be true. I think it's true. One hand, you know.
Yeah, there was
I mean, he's a fire brigade man, by the way.
Yeah, there was also an interesting one where I think it was the first game against England that Ireland had played in, that it was actually, there was 20 players on the
That's
pitch
right.
at the same time.
That's
So
right.
that's, even just looking back into that side of things, into the history, it's not something that you would have expected to see. Like you mentioned, there was somebody in that 1975 or the 1875 game where there was some one hand, or that there was 20 players in each team playing.
Yeah, but the one player used to wear a monocle. A monocle. You go on the field with his monocle. Ding. And then if he was going to tackle somebody, take the monocle out, put it in his pocket. Yeah, that's the way it was. So you can see how far it's come, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, you want to see the menus for the pre-match lunches back in those days. It could be 10 courses, you know.
Yeah,
Up to soup and this and that and champagne, but it's different time, you know.
absolutely.
It's amazing. It's amazing the you know, it's the same as like the All Blacks. Like, I mean, just looking into things, how do they get the name All Blacks? And in way back when reporter was given in his script for the game, after the game, and he said these New Zealanders are amazing. They play like All Blacks. They're all so good. Booker second row.
Yeah.
And the guy, when it got to the printing, the compositing, or whatever you do, they made a mistake and they put an L before the B, and that stuck. All Blacks.
That's a really interesting one, and when even just looking back on Ireland, is that they have taken a lot from other nations. So, for example, when they played in 1894, I was reading that they actually used one of the Welsh models where they actually used 7 backs instead of having 6, which was kind of the popular thing at the time. You then look at early on when they played against New Zealand, and I guess it's one of those, they actually use the opposite of having, where they had just 7 forwards, which is known as kind of the rover tactic. But it was the first time that they got to play against New Zealand, which was this all kind of just rugby international for Ireland. So I guess when we look at things, that they were able to incorporate what some sides that were successful already, and they were able to bring that into the Ireland camp, because like we said, it's very interesting that before becoming a professional team, they were still able to beat some of really good teams. We saw in 1909 where they beat France as well, which is where they would have been far ahead at that point in time. So the one thing, it really is amazing. The one thing that I'd kind of question is, do you think that the current system where the schools rugby that feeds into the provinces is kind of the right way to go? Because that's what we're seeing in both England and Ireland now, and why you're seeing so many talented young players come through. And how important do you think that is for the future of Irish rugby?
Very important, Karen. Very important. You know, these schools producing these gentlemen, these young gentlemen, and then when they go on and finish their schooling, they might get into the academy, and they will decide, obviously before that, if they want to make this a career. And they don't really know if they're going to succeed in their chosen profession. A lot of them do, like James. Ryan. But it's a big decision for them, will I go to university and I want to be this or that? Now, they can do both at the moment, or they have been for several years. They can do their studies, do their training, play their games. And some of them make it out the other side and, and become legends, some of them. And because of the love of rugby. That's what it is, love of rugby.
Yeah, absolutely. And we see that with the likes of, when you mentioned James Ryan there, where within, what was it, the first 2 years, I don't think he lost a professional game when he was playing for Leinster, when he was playing for Ireland. And
Unique.
it really was a unique time seeing him come through. And we're seeing more players come through now, which kind of leads us to kind of some of the games this year. And I guess a lot of people were a little bit disappointed with the way kind of the Six Nations, even though it was a little bit different in the previous season because of half of it got postponed because of COVID. How well do you think the Irish team is equipped going into kind of the future Six Nations? I know there's this year, but we're looking towards kind of, again, the whole ideal of what the likes of Australia or South Africa do is that they look towards the next World Cup. So how well do you think Ireland are positioned over the next couple of years to challenge some of those top teams? Because we've seen just how good England have been over the last couple of seasons. Do you think Ireland are that far off, especially looking towards the Six Nations that starts this weekend?
You've got very long questions there, Kieran.
Yeah. But basically, do you think that Ireland, in terms of, we're looking at this Six Nations here, do you think they're well equipped to challenge both England and France, who came first and second in
Absolutely.
just a couple of months ago?
Of course, yeah. I would have 100% confidence in the players, the management, coaches. Of course, yeah. Why not? I mean, guy there was reputed to be the first guy that climbed Everest. He failed actually in the first attempt, but he was asked when he got back. He was asked, "Why did you try to do that?" And his answer was, "Because it's there." The same with the rugby lads. Six Nations. Why are they doing all this? Because it's there. Because it's winnable. Because it's a challenge, and because they have faith. Plus, not to mention all the fans and talent, and not to mention all the fans in Ireland and throughout the whole world that'll be tuned into that game on Sunday, and give them a bit of a lift during these darker times, which hopefully will be out soon,
Absolutely. And I guess it's good to see some of the younger players getting to come in. You look at the likes of Hugo Keenan, who's going to be starting I know he came through halfway through the competition just recently in the last few months. You also have, I guess, one that people are talking about is James Lowe, starting to get to play in his first Six Nations appearance for Ireland. How much different do you think that would be? We've seen it before with the likes of CJ, where he's come in and again he's come over from South Africa. We've seen James come over from New Zealand. How different do you think it must be for them to come into an Irish setup when they have to really, I know CJ has gone in with the culture of Irish rugby and it's really early on for James. So how do you think his expectation would be for his first Six Nations?
Well, I can only imagine what he's feeling now. It's like winning the lotto. I just, you see the difference between a bagman and the players. Like, the players take over when they walk across onto the field. And no matter how many times you've been bagman or this or that nutritionist, you never really know, unless you put on a green jersey or a red jersey. You'll never know what it's like. So I can only imagine what James is thinking now. He's over the moon, like going to Cardiff, play against Wales, Six Nations. It's like a dream come true.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we said, we've seen a lot of young players being able to step up. We mentioned James Ryan. We've seen the likes of Jordan Larmour in recent years. We've seen We've seen Hugo Keenan obviously last year. Is there any player in the current Irish team that you really enjoy watching their individual performance, whether it's for their province or for the country?
Yeah, there is. All of them, Kieran. Yeah, love all of them, how they perform. Yeah. I would never visualize, leave that to the coaches.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing, I guess, is Andy Farrell has been part of some of the Lions tours recently as well. Have you any good kind of interactions with Andy? Because I know a lot of Irish fans don't really know that much about him, just because I think he's been given the unfortunate hand that he came in to be the coach and then COVID hit, and you don't really get to kind of get that many inside stories. I feel like a lot of people knew a lot about Joe Schmidt when he was the Ireland coach. What is Andy Farrell like from your own kind of, whether it's you met him while you were on the Lions tour or?
Yeah. Firstly, he's a gentleman and a scholar. Great man to tour with, to be around. He has this presence sort of when he walks in the room. He's fantastic, and he'll make his own history, as other coaches have. Declan Kidney, Warren, Eddie, Joe. He'll make his own. Watch this space. He's the man.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, because a lot of people have the debate that because he was on Joe Schmidt's coaching staff, that it's hard to get kind of, I guess, this new system in place, or this kind of new start when it's someone that was on an old regime. Do you think that Andy was the correct man to take over from Joe? Because again, we've mentioned before, Joe was there under one of the most successful periods of Irish rugby. And Andy, I think he's lucky, because you're looking at some of these young players come through. What are some of the things that you've seen that make him a really good coach? Because you mentioned that he's the man and to watch this space.
Well, there again, it's that area is slightly above me, Kieran. Coaching.
Even just as a leader.
All I can say about Andy, if you ever sat down and had a pint with him, you'd understand what I'm saying. He's just a gentleman. But if you've ever got a chance to sit down with him, take it.
Hopefully we will get that chance to sit down. To be honest, I think we would all take a chance to sit down with anybody to have a pint again. But again,
very good, Kieran. Very good.
With the COVID world, and we don't know how long that's going to be. I just want to say thanks for joining me today, Rala. It's been really interesting. Some of the stories that kind of getting to kind of look up, but also the insights. It's always really, really good, and I really appreciate you joining me today.
Kieran, before we go, what's the name? How can I look back at this thing?
Yeah, I'll send you all the links. It's basically on YouTube or Spotify, so you can just look up the Hall of Sports podcast.
The Hall of Sports with a Z.
Yeah.
Podcast.
Yeah.
And come here. Will they get these? Would they get this in New Zealand by any chance?
Yeah, it can be everywhere. So yeah.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, no, I'm hoping Joe gets a glimpse of it, and my great friend over there, Pete and Jane and John Sturgeon, who was the manager of the All Blacks at one stage. But I'm hoping if they do, hey guys, hope you're well.
Absolutely, it's been great having you on, and look, we'll be chatting again. So thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure, Kieran. Mia Placile, as they say in Bloemfontein. Thank you.
Thank you very much.